Push the button. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Township of Wainfleet Special Council meeting of March 3rd, 2021 to order. And I would like to begin with the land acknowledgement statement by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, I see none. So we're going to move into staff reports, and we're going to start with our librarian, chief librarian, and the chair of the library board, please. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Okay, certainly, yeah.
Okay.
No problem. Okay, so we'll just hang on to that for a minute there, a quick little change. And we're going to go right to our treasurer, Ms. Louie, to present the 2021 operating budget.
Thank you. So good evening, members of council, staff, and residents. This evening we'll be discussing the draft operating budget for the Township of Wainfleet. So I'll do a brief presentation outlining the changes at a high level to each of the department budgets. Following the presentation, members of council will have an opportunity to ask any questions. Okay, so the tax bill has four components that impact it. The first is the municipal rate, which is the process we are currently going through. So determining the capital and operating funds required for the township to operate and working backwards to calculate a rate. So the percentage that council is deliberating over these next couple of nights is they're directly in control of, and that's considered the municipal levy. Secondly is the regional levy, which also includes waste management. This is approved at the upper tier, and the rate is dictated to us, and we levy taxes on their behalf. We have minimal input in this rate. The same goes for the education rates. The final piece of the puzzle is the assessed value. This is the value that is used to calculate your property taxes with. So every 4 years, MPAC reassesses all of the homes in the province of Ontario. The last 4-year cycle was set to end in 2020. The province of Ontario has postponed the reassessment as part of their response to COVID-19. This means two things for the municipality and its residents. The assessment used to calculate the tax bill in 2021 will be the same one that was used last year, which represents the value of your property in 2016. And the second thing is the growth demonstrated in this presentation is the actual growth that we achieved, not as a result of phased-in assessment. So this slide is just a snapshot, which you'll find in the budget package as well, of just the changes from year to year for the different departments and what that represents as a percentage. And you'll see the assessment growth listed up there as 1.3%. It's kind of hard to see, sorry about that. So there are a couple of pressures that impacted every department across the township. One of them being the cost of living increase, which was to wages, which was across the board. And the second one was our insurance premiums. We did go out to tender last year as we were due for renewal, and we had a significant increase the prior year. We did do okay with the request for proposal. However, it is still higher, but that's just a trend in the market. But that did impact all of the department budgets. Okay, so we're just going to go through the different departments and the changes, just with kind of a high-level overview of what changed. And then we'll circle back and go through each department after the presentation, and council can ask any question pertaining to anything that they might see in those specific departments. So the first one is general revenue. There was a slight change here, but it was mainly, there was a reduction of $50,000, which was one-time funding, and the other $50,000 reduction was just reallocation of revenue. It was the OCIF funding, which we've just reallocated over to capital. Council, there was no increase to the council budget, so that remained the same. Same with the election budget, which I know, although it's not an election year, There is work that's done on the election each year, so a small portion of the clerk wages are attributed to this. Grants, so this one had experienced a decrease, and this was as a result of the direction of council to freeze the grant program for 2021. The administration department, so this one decreased a little bit, and this was due to a result. Last year we had a couple of one-time expenses in there for consultants. We offset our insurance increase last year with an increase here. We also did use a little bit of reserves to offset that, and a couple of studies that we were doing, one being the development charge study as well as the organizational review, which were performed initiated last year, so those have been removed from this year. COVID-19, so this is kind of a weird one. You will see expenses obviously in there from last year. The number is significantly higher than 5,000. A lot of it was a reallocation of wages because we were trying to track our expenses in the event that any government funding became available to us. So the majority of the wages and benefits, it doesn't represent overtime. It's just a reallocation of staff's wages to kind of give us a more fulsome picture of what the actual costs were. So this 5,000 that we've left in here is just knowing that when we are able to operate and to open up to the public, there will be some increased costs in terms of supplies and maintenance that we're going to have to do for the foreseeable future anyways. The next one is fire. So fire had an increase. One of the largest increases, largest department increases, but this is mainly due to the fact that we have, as promised last year, we have started to build in the debt payment for the central station. So we've added $100,000 towards that payment into this budget so that we can phase in the payment, which we talked about last year during budget time. The increase in insurance hit fire a little bit harder than some of the other departments. We did, through the RFP process, we did actually change insurance providers. So they had a little bit of a shift in the allocation of premiums, and the premiums were had a slightly higher allocation towards fire in their premiums versus the previous company that we were with. And any of the other changes there was some minor changes to some of the other accounts, and it was largely due to the fact that the number of volunteers, the chief has worked diligently to get the number of volunteers to what the target number was in the master fire plan. So protective services, so this department actually experienced a decrease on a whole, and this is largely due to the implementation of the AMPS system, and they had an increase in revenue. Therefore, the overall department had a decrease. So the next one is building, which is also part of protective services, but it isn't actually part of the summary sheet. I'm sure council members know, but for anyone that doesn't fully know, the building department is fully sustainable, so it doesn't operate on tax dollars. So the idea of the building department is it's full cost recovery, so the building permit process, they charge enough fees to fully operate the department. So you'll notice a couple of different changes in this one, which once we go into each department, the manager of protective services can talk from a strategic standpoint, the direction that department is going. But they are proposing to add an additional employee to try to focus efforts on addressing the boil water advisory, increased building demands. So if anyone has any questions about that department, we can definitely get there when we get to that department. Just keeping in mind that it doesn't actually impact the tax levy. So it's just basically our best estimate at what the revenues will be and the expenses. And anything over and above, if in 1 year, for example, if we have more permits than we are anticipating, then they would contribute to their building permit reserve, which then the next year, if we had less building permits than we anticipated, they would draw from their reserve. So if any reserve contributions are a plug their budget has to equal 0. The next department is roads. So this had a slight decrease, and this was just kind of truing up some actuals. So there was some allocations that shifted. No major changes in any of the line items.
And if I could jump in real quickly, again, that roads number is roads operations, not capital. Capital was a separate budget that we dealt with the other day.
Sorry, yes, thank you for that. Building maintenance. So as I mentioned when we were discussing capital, how some of the accounts are a little bit, the chart of accounts might need to be cleaned up. This one actually had a reduction because the debt payment, when the debt payment was built in for the arena, we built it in before we actually issued the debt, and the debt payment is lower than the amount that we put in. So updating the amount to the actual debt payment reduced that budget. So the debt is attached to the building, which some people might not think, like, it's not exactly easy to see and to identify. So we do hope to clean that up at some point throughout the year to make the accounts a little bit easier to follow, and so we can see them across the township. Cemetery, so again, as Richard mentioned on Monday, unfortunately, we have been busy. So this department experienced a decrease, and this is because revenues are up. Recreation, so I'm sure everyone is familiar with this one. So with the arena being closed, some like community hall not being able to be rented out, so this department did have an increase, and that's due to a decrease in revenues. So we didn't fully decrease the revenues. We took a position. We took a position to leave the revenues. To only reduce them slightly, which is a common position that treasurers across the region have taken, just because this is a one-off situation. So reducing the revenues to nothing would be really hard to kind of justify the expenses, and we're trying to avoid the extreme up and down for one-off situations. And hopefully we are nearing the end of COVID. Drainage, so this department, there was a slight decrease in this department, and that was just due to an increase in grant revenue. Planning, so there is an increase in the planning department, part of which is for the Esri software that we get from the region. And the additional increase is for one additional planning personnel. So the proposed new position came forward as the primary recommendation from our organizational review, which that's in its final stages now and will be before council shortly. So this review was approved during the 2020 budget process. And once we get into the departments, the CAO will be able to elaborate on this new position and some of the responsibilities that would fall under this position when we get to the planning department. And library. So library did experience a slight increase. It was largely due to wages and benefits increasing, which was just as a result of cost of living increase, as well as a board decision to reduce the fines. So in speaking with the CEO of the library, though, we did leave the students at full complement. So if it is council's desire to reduce the grant to the library, she does feel that she doesn't feel that she will need all of the students this summer just because they'll likely be operating virtually. So she is flexible there to try to kind of reallocate some of that budget if council sees fit to reduce the grant to them. So a summary of all of the different departments. So the draft operating budget, all of the departments combined equals a 1.6193% increase to taxes. And then the infrastructure levy, which we didn't really talk about during capital and it wasn't really addressed here, so I want to make sure that's still at the front of everyone's minds, because that 2% is on top of the numbers that we've talked about so far. So I want that to be very clear. And the draft capital budget, which was discussed on Monday, again, these numbers are just proposed and they're draft. So 1.98% was the capital portion, which adds to a total municipal increase of 5.59%. And again, one of the benefits to doing the budget a little bit later in the year is that we already know the region and the education rates. So that's what that bottom number is there. It's the blended increase. So using the region's increase and the educational rate along with our rate, the actual impact to the tax bill would be 3.1578%. And that is if everything was as proposed. So as mentioned, assessments aren't changing. So you can go to the next slide, it might be helpful. So with the assessment not changing and this blended rate, which is the actual rate, if your taxes, the average assessment in Wainfleet is $314,693, which would have meant that their tax bill last year was $44.87. And if we apply this 3% increase, that would yield an increase in $141.69. And that's for residential. And when I said that the assessments didn't change, that's assuming that nobody did any work to their property. Like if you did any renovations or took out a building permit or anything like that, MPAC was still going forward with those processes. It was just their scheduled reassessment that was postponed.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we have the library folks sitting by, and we'll do them right away. Just for the public, and the councillors know this as well, though, the staff have been working hard on this for a number of months. The CAO and I have had a number of conversations about trying to keep the tax increase very low this year. This is already a very lean budget in many ways. They've already gotten rid of some of the excess that we thought was unnecessary or we could do without or postpone till next year. So strategically, the township has really turned the corner, and strategically, as I look at it all from a whole picture, we're really headed in a great direction now. There's lots of things are being improved. Our finances are improving. We're setting aside reserves. We are getting to where we need to be, and compared to 3 years ago. So it's really, all due to the staff know the general direction that I've asked to go, and that's to be, a leaner government, spend our money wisely. And they've been working at that, and we're getting there. So as I say, this is already a very leaned out budget, and the blended tax increase of 3.1578 is great. That news for the folks on the street, in my opinion, and we'll go from there. So, okay, and also I asked staff to bring back in a look, and that's why you have on your desk the grant policy. We did a 0% grant this year, and I missed that because there were some things there that did not need funding because they weren't using their money last year. But there are some groups there like Pathstone, Hospice, and that I said let's have a second look at that. So that we'll have a discussion on that this evening as well. And if we remain where we are now on it, so be it. But at least we had a second look at it, and just to make sure, because some of those things are the need is increasing because of the COVID. So, and with that, I'll look to our librarian, Chief Librarian, Lori, to do her presentation, please.
Okay. Mainly with fines, with the library board decided that because of COVID, we haven't been charging fines to our patrons, and also we are joining Link. Actually, our live date is March 25th, and we are no longer charging fines on children's materials. That being said, if an item is lost or damaged, the replacement fee is still charged for them. The other items just to bring to your attention is I've left all the revenue sources at the same as last year. I didn't know exactly how I should have gone about that. And we've kept them the same for now. There is potentially going to be a little bit of a deficit if we proceed as we are now, but with opening the doors, we're hoping that that will soon increase some of our numbers, such as copies and laminator and that sort of thing.
Okay, anything further?
Wages and benefits, of course, which Mallory alluded to.
Okay, great. Are there any questions of Lori in regards to the budget? Councillor Van Vliet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Lori. Lori, how many employees do we have at the library?
We have 2 full-time and 4 part-time. And we also share IT with the township.
And how many hours do the part-time guys, or women, men, whatever, do? Just ballpark it.
They're about 19 hours. About 19 hours each.
Per week?
Depending. Yeah, a week, yep.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Lori. Lori, conferences and training. This will be a regular topic of mine for the evening, but
Right.
at any rate, last year, you spent 10% of your the allocation, and I would suspect that largely this year, anything that is going on is going to be virtual. So, do you think that the $3,000 is realistic?
I mean, we could cut back there as well a little bit, but there are still different training programs that I would like to have staff attend, such as with Link. There'll be ongoing training as well. So there is a little wiggle room there.
But are they going to be virtual versus in person?
They'll be virtual, but again, it depends. They're $450 to $500 a shot, so per person. So
yeah, okay, all right, good enough.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, but the virtual, they still charge like $500 to attend. So, yeah. Any other questions of the library staff? Councillor Councillor Cridlin, sorry.
No, thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Lori, for your recap. I'm just going to maybe take a slightly different viewpoint from Councillor Gilmore on our training and conferences. I think part of the reason these numbers were so low is people just didn't go anywhere last year. So I'm almost seeing as next year, now that we know that we're virtual, we can plan for virtual conferences and courses. We will still save enormously on anything that's distanced or had an overnight or any other costs. So I know we'll still see savings, but I actually would see us trying to catch up on training that was missed. So if there's still having those comments, if there's still something in terms of courses that we won't be seeing, then maybe you can come back to us or suggest a different number. But I see this next year as trying to catch up on what training we did miss. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Anything further of our library staff? Okay, seeing nothing further. Thank you very much, Lori. Do you have any final comments?
no, I'd just like to thank council and allowing us to come out and speak on behalf of the library board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move through this budget. Does anybody want to break it all to think about some, questions, that sort of thing, or do you want to just start working right through it? Okay, questions are already done up. So, okay, so I think we're going to do it by section, And so we'll start with the admin section, and if you have questions in there, please refer to the page and the line, and we'll work through it that way. So are there any questions regarding the admin section of the budget? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank the treasurer for the ongoing improvement to the budget and giving us all these actual numbers. It's a great improvement over the very first year when I sat down, opened the book, and there was 2 columns, and I closed it right back up. I said, you can't work like this. So now we've got 4 years of history, which is very helpful. Just a general question before I get into a few specifics. Can you explain to us what happens to operational surpluses and how do you show them?
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So once the audit has completed, if it is determined that there is a surplus, then that will come back before council with a recommendation from staff where to allocate that surplus. And ultimately, it will be council's decision. So we'll recommend which reserves to put it in. If council has appetite to change one of the ones that we're recommending and put it all to a different one, knowing something that's coming down the line, then that's absolutely up to council. But it will come before council to make the ultimate decision.
Okay, thank you. And so I want to just start by referring to page 3 under Mayor and Council. And generally I make these similar comments every year regarding some of the numbers that are budgeted and grossly underspent. And in the totals, this is why I appreciate the history, but so in the totals 2018, 19, and 20, there's approximately $75,000 over the course of those 3 years that money that was levied and not spent, and a lot of it is in ongoing categories: food and allowances, council conferences and staff training, some mileage, advertising, but. So I'm just, every year we go through and trim it. I'd like to get all those, I'd like to see all those numbers come back to closer to actual, because historically now we can see that, that there was $75,000. So over the past 3 years then, every year we've gotten a report and that's gone into some operational reserve somewhere, but specifically, would it go, like, where would it go? It doesn't land in mayor and council that we don't have a reserve, and yet that money was generated by underspending in that department. So that's sort of a more detailed analysis of my first question. Like, we've got this department that created this surplus, but I don't know where the money exactly landed in those years. Well, I can't recall. I'm sure that we approved it somewhere, but you know where I'm going, because I just don't like to see this continual levy and then not spent. That's been gone on for the last 3 years, at least, unless I'm missing something.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So a couple of points on that. One thing that I meant to say during my presentation is everyone is aware of the pandemic that's going on and the impact that might have had on some of the actual figures. So I caution on the reliance on the 2020 figures in certain categories because business wasn't as usual last year. So, and initially we put the fear in every single department to not spend any money at all because we weren't sure how things were going to land out, and we didn't want to end up so far in the red that we didn't know what to do. So everyone kind of halted and did not do business as usual for the majority of last year, just to ensure that the bottom line, regardless of each department, because some departments like building maintenance, for example, where we had to implement different physical, like barriers, and all of the different products that we needed to comply with provincial and public health regulations. Some departments were hit harder than others, so everybody tried to kind of tighten things up to make sure that the township overall financial position was positive as opposed to being in the red. Another kind of factor that impacts this council budget is the term of council. So each term of council is different based on the makeup of the council. So for every person like yourself that isn't so much interested in going to a conference, Councillor Cridland finds great value in going to conferences. So I'm a little bit afraid to cut too much that we handcuff the next council or the next year even when things do open back up and we have an opportunity to do it, because that's when we end up with a budget that's severely fluctuating based on just everyday business. There's enough factors that are one-offs that impact the budget that we have to try to deal with and try to manage. And I mean, at the end of the day, these are just our best guesses and our best estimates. And if you go back even prior to 2017, different councils of the day, these numbers are significantly different. So the mindset of this council is definitely lean in spending, so that's good, and I'm sure the taxpayers appreciate that. However, especially in the first term of council, there are some council members that like the education and are trying to familiarize themselves with the different components of the township and how everything works and is integrated and would benefit from those dollars being there. In terms of the surplus, it doesn't really go department by department. So even if admin had a surplus and we were the only department that had a surplus, we wouldn't necessarily put it to an admin reserve because we don't have one for starters. But it would depend on what the whole year looked like and how it's the overall position, right? So if we have a surplus overall, what was the main driver of that surplus? Is it a one-off situation, and should we put it back into whatever the cause of the surplus was? So if we know we have a surplus because we didn't do this, this, and this, then we'll put it into the general, knowing that we'll have to pull from it to do this, this, and this in the future because it's likely a timing thing or something like that. So there's not a super black and white answer in terms of where it goes and how it's allocated. It's really dependent on what the driver of the surplus was.
Okay, so I want to then focus specifically on conferences and staff training council because historically, other than 2017, which was the only year we were even remotely close to the budget amount, the other years have been averaging 50% or less. This year, I think that it'll be significantly less because 2 or 3 of the things have already passed, haven't they? And they've been virtual anyway. Like, does AMO charge the same amount to attend virtually as if you go there, other than meals and lodging? That's a bit ridiculous. However, I'm trying to find some dollars to address the mayor's concern about the grant applications, and there's probably some wiggle room in that column. And food allowances, council, I doubt that we'll be needing all that either. It's just an ongoing pet peeve with me that we have columns that are significantly underspent year over year over year, and that's why it's good to have the historical data. So I think we should trim some of those and then come back to, at the end of this whole discussion, add up what we've got, and then if we want to address the mayor's concern on some of these other things, then we can take it from there, and there'll be a few other places as we go along. Just one final question. Professional fees council, who is that?
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So I believe that's for the integrity commissioner and closed session investigator.
But we, in my recollection, we haven't used the person, so I hope that's not who it is. Last year we spent $8,600, and we had no investigations that I'm aware of.
So through the mayor to all of council, so that's predominantly what the budget line is for. But it's any professional fees. So I believe that one was used for the council orientation, was it not? I can look it up.
Yeah, okay. Because that particular column is always grossly overspent historically. So there's a problem there on the other side of the coin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, if the treasurer can look that up, but one of the base functions of that account is to cover off integrity commissioner and closed session investigator complaints. You are correct. We have had none during this term. So
We had one.
okay, fair enough. So there were some fees expended, but it certainly doesn't account for the entirety of it.
Okay.
I think that was gratis too. So.
Whoops, sorry. Okay, I'll defer to my colleagues if they have any questions or comments about any of those numbers.
So just as we go along this evening, everyone, we only have one more meeting after this, so if we can come to consensus on anything that you want to see reduced, we should present that to Mallory so she can go to the departments and discuss it. Because we don't have, we will hopefully are done in the next meeting. So otherwise it could drag on and on. So if you see a spot and you want to see a reduction in it, we have a discussion and the discussion lands that we all agree, then we need to put that right forward in concrete language, and then it'll go from there. So, okay, who was next? Councillor Van Vliet? Okay, Councillor McDonald. Don't fight.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the one I have is telephone for council as well. I don't know why that's as high as it is, but unless, is that the internet on the iPad, is what it is?
Yeah, through the mayor to all of
Okay.
council. So telephone, it's just a poorly named account because it's consistent with all the other departments. It's telephone, it's for cellular, so it's
Okay.
the cellular chip
Okay,
in the iPads.
yep, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm very, very careful of my phone, so.
Yeah, no, I wasn't blaming you, I was just trying to figure out where it was, right? Because one guy can't spend that.
Yeah, Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, mine is advertising. Because Councillor Gilmore covered most of them, but what do we advertise?
Sorry, through the mayor to Councillor Van Vliet, specifically mayor and council advertising? So I believe historically this is any organizations that come forward asking council to advertise in their programs. I believe the Fall Fair.
Yeah, there's been a number of those.
Yeah, the skating program. It's usually requests of council. So we have that budget line. They often come before council and council approves them. So it's just somewhere to allocate those expenses.
And there are some that don't come before council and maybe $100 here and there. Those we do, but if it's any amount at all, I'm very careful about that. So we tend not to do it.
The New Year's levy, things like that, that would be like a Christmas wish or anything like that that comes from council would go to that budget line.
I know there's been some disappointed folks where previously we were advertising and in the last year, 2 years, we haven't. So we're a little more careful about that. Okay, so is there anything in here concrete that you want to say, I want X amount of dollars taken out of this one? Councillor Cridlin, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I just through you to the treasurer. What is the cost of living increase that has been allocated across the township?
So
Is it a percentage point or like 1 point something or whatever, just in general?
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridlin, we were in union negotiations for multiple years to get our contract ratified. So the 2019 increase was 1.5 I lost a year. The 2020 increase was 1.5 and the 2021 was 1.75.
Okay, and through you, Mayor, if I could just continue. So there's nobody in the council, I think, that's also had any increases since this new council. Am I correct?
So the cost of living increase is applied across the board to all township staff and council.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so looking at admin, the number, Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I see that we had $6,900 in legal in 19, nothing this year. We've got $20,000 allocated. We now have a part-time legal, so is that what's gonna pay that part-time legal, or is she coming out of somewhere else?
Through you, part of the reduction there is to account for that, that new position that was created and shared with the other municipalities. So you are seeing a reduction in your allocation based on that new position.
No, but it's the same. It's $20,000 we put in here, even though we had nothing in 19, or 2020. There's an actual cost. Yep. So I'm wondering, can we cut that number?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Treasurer, we did cut it from 20 down to 18 for this year.
Yeah, but can we cut more than that? Yeah, well, that's what I'm just asking. All right, I'm just asking if.
Wait.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you could cut it to 0 if you wanted to, but the issue is it's a brand new position. We are still sort of evaluating that position, and we don't want to go too far at any one time because we're unsure of the end result, if you will. So we've taken sort of a conservative approach. We've done a small adjustment to it. Again, I defer to the treasurer as well.
Yeah, so through the mayor to all of council. So we took the stance that first of all, we got the lawyer on board partway through this year. We didn't have it from the start of the year, but we were taking the stance by which we're going to monitor the costs, because there are some projects that we won't be able to give to her or that'll be more beneficial to outsource. And we do only have her 1 day a week. So we're just going to monitor we did reduce each one of them slightly, and we're going to monitor the cost. The trouble with reducing something all the way to nothing, there's a risk associated with that, because if this term of council is not utilizing the legal fees as much as we maybe have sometimes in the past. So once we reduce something to 0, then we're not doing the taxpayers any favors, because we're eventually going to have to increase them, because this is a short term.
I think I asked the question wrong. Okay, I think I asked the question wrong. Her wages have been all allocated to council, is that correct? And she's not anywhere else? No? I just didn't see legal anywhere else when I was going through this. Maybe I just missed it, so.
So through the mayor to all of council. So it's in admin, and it's under a contribution to other municipalities, because she's not our employee. We're paying for her service to another municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll look to the CAO has comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have some more information about the professional fees account that you were asking about. In addition to Integrity Commissioner and closed session investigator, just to advise, those professional fees include the professional fees associated with the broadcast of council meetings to the public via WeStream at this stage. So again, as we see more and more meetings going online and being broadcast, we see additional costs.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions on admin? Councillor Cridlin had her hand up first, sir, please.
Sorry, Mayor, through you, I was going to just jump to a different page.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, I'm just going to jump to fire.
No, we're still in admin. We'll stay to admin first. We'll do it by
Okay,
section.
then I'm
My
gonna-
apologies.
I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gilmore, anything more with admin?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, do you want some suggestions now? Should we wait till Monday? What's your pleasure?
Let's start now. If we want to cut some dollars now, let's do it tonight. Make suggestions. Staff will make record of that. We'll consult with the various departments. And by Monday, then we should have a revised budget. So I'd like to actually land on some hard numbers tonight.
All right, well, in light of that, then, I would move that we reduce food allowances council to by $1,000 and conferences and staff training by $2,500 and mileage by $1,000 and advertising by $1,000. And I'm a little puzzled by miscellaneous grants and donations as well, why that went up when we didn't spend anything in 19 or 20. So that, I don't want to confuse things. I'm going to propose that we reduce that to $2,000 based on the, after we get the answer of why that went up and was underspent 2 years in a row.
Okay, thank you. You have those numbers down recorded? Okay, great. If you could respond to Councillor Gilmore's question first. You had a question. Let's do the question first, and then we'll come back and go through the cuts.
Okay, through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So that line item was there prior to instituting the grant and donation policy, and even with the policy in place, there was still one-off. So the 2020 number, it's an allocation because it's not an expense. So what needs to be, what would have been allocated over there is fee waivers. But since the events were canceled, some of the events were canceled during, as a result of COVID, the allocations didn't take place. But that does just give council the opportunity for anyone that didn't meet the application deadline or an event came after the application deadline. That gives council a little bit of opportunity to provide some of that. And also some of the township policies in terms of bereavement, retirement, things like that. That does come from that line as well. So any tributes that are sent on behalf of council, as well as retirement gifts or anything like that, as well as any one-off requests that council might have or fee waiver requests, because we do still charge for the facility because the staff time is still involved in terms of cleaning and everything like that, even when the fee is waived. So it is still an internal allocation between revenue and expense.
Okay, well, I appreciate the answer, but it's back to the historical accuracy. We spent $700 since 2017 and levied $5,700 and like over $11,000, and we spent $700. So there's a disconnect there. So in light of your answer, we'll leave it at 2,000 for now, but there's a big disconnect in that line somewhere that should get addressed, unless I'm, again, missing something, but the numbers are what they are. So.
Okay, so let's go through then, because Councillor Gilmore, you had a number of items there that you wanted to see about reduction. As per Councillor Van Vliet's comments, just let's say the page, say the line number, and we can look at it and discuss it from there. So,
Mr. Mayor, just before moving on, I think Councillor Gilmore originally said that grants line reduced by 4,000, and then at the end he said reduced by 2,000.
Well, it's 4,000 in there. I would reduce it to 2,000 for now, but it needs it needs a look, because there's, like I said, over $11,000 levied since 2017 and $700 spent. That's way too much.
Okay, so what's your first item that you want us to look at?
You want me to review the
Yeah,
list?
you went over 3 or 4 that you wanted to
Yeah,
reduce.
well, there was 5 numbers, so I'll go back over them. So food allowance and council, these are just the reduction, okay? So the reduction amount of 1,000 in that line. Conference and staff training by 2,500. Mileage by 1,000. And then advertising by 1,000. And miscellaneous grants and donations by 2,000. Yeah, all right. Yeah, 2,4. You're right, 7,500.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What about miscellaneous council? I missed that one. Sorry, Mal, you're busy there.
Miscellaneous grants?
No, miscellaneous council.
Oh,
Can't hear you. Can you?
Miscellaneous council. It's like almost halfway through. It's 2,000.
So through the mayor to Councillor Van Vliet, I would have to pull the GL to see what goes through that, but I will report back.
Okay, thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just a comment, this is one of the things that the treasurer mentioned the other day about revisiting the chart of accounts, trying to get the names, account structure redone so that it accurately and fully depicts the expenses that are charged to the various accounts, and making sure that it's transparent and understandable by everyone. So that's one of the big projects we have targeted for the upcoming future.
Good to know.
Okay, so that totals up to $7,500 by my math. Is there any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I have a
Councillor
question.
Van Vliet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if we take that out of the budget, next year when life goes back to normal, we can add it back in somewhere.
Certainly. Yep.
Okay, just checking.
Councillor, CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you take it out of the budget this year, you will see a levy reduction this year. And if and when you want to put it back in, you will see a corresponding levy increase next year. So if it is your intent really to take it out as a one-year sort of action, be aware that that will result in an automatic tax increase next year.
If we approve it. Councillor Amor, Councillor Van Vliet? Okay, Councillor Gilmore?
it's not my intent to take it out this year, last year, any year. It's, I want to take it out this year, but my point is an ongoing concern about them not reflecting historical figures. So, if we use historical numbers more accurately, we won't have to increase anything because they're already too high, and they're still too high. So it's just a matter of tidying up, as you say, and I welcome that too, because despite the fact that we've made lots of improvements, this is still a difficult document to weave your way through. So I don't think that's necessarily a fair comment to say that we're going to have an increase, because they've been over budgeted for a long time. So what we do with it, I think we can revisit it at the end and talk about so we may not decrease the total levy based on that number or anything else if we address your other concern. But we need to work through all this stuff, and I apologize for taking so much time, but I'm really stuck on using historical data. So
It's time well spent, actually. So we don't need a motion for that, Will? That's just, if everybody generally agrees, direction to staff to change the numbers. Because it's in process, correct? Okay, so is everybody basically in favor of those changes as suggested by Councillor Gilmore? I see Donna's hand, and
Through you, Mayor, obviously the principle that Councillor Gilmore is very sound. and I certainly support the, going in those directions. I'm a little reluctant to, take off the conference and the training at the moment, just that line. But again, as Councillor Gilmore has pointed out, there is still room. So I do support the overall approach to what he's trying to do. That just happens to be a category that I think we're in catch up next year, and depending on what's available to us, that is something that's still worthwhile to many people on council. So just add those comments, and we'll land on the right number no matter what. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And as per the CAO's comment, next year when everything's back to normal, then we may have to see those numbers increase a little bit. But reflecting reality is important, and so, it can change. Okay, is everybody happy with those adjustments? Okay, I see consensus around the table. So we'll ask the treasurer to make those adjustments in the tune of $7,500 to the noted columns. Is there anything more with admin that we would like to discuss? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you. Just on the same theme on page 4, and I guess what I'd like to see happen is a little more predictability, planning ahead. So conferences and staff training, again, for admin, generally underspent historically, other than 2017, which was, there must have been a lot going on then. But 18, less than half, 19, slightly more than half, 20, well less than half. So there's got to be a way, to figure out ahead what's coming down the pipe, who's going, and get the number a little bit closer. Like, there's just got to be a way to do that.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, so I understand where you're coming from. There is some challenges associated with this one because there's a bunch of different factors. So we don't go to conferences or sign up for training just for the sake of signing up for it. So if for example, if there's a finance conference that's coming up and it's predominantly focused on water and sewer, and I go to that conference every year, I'm not going to enroll in that. I'm not going to get value from that. So I would, even though it's budgeted for every year at the beginning of the year, because the agenda is not out until weeks before, I have the opportunity to go to it, but I chose not to because it's not going to add value for the taxpayers. In the contract, in the collective agreement, we have an agreement to pay for some courses that are directly benefiting the township and correlating with the specific jobs, as well as some non-union employees have different things in their contracts regarding conferences that they're able to attend and courses and training that they are able to take. And this fluctuates. I mean, some of these lower years, we had high staff turnover, so the positions were vacant. There was no, and they weren't at budget time, but they were following. So we literally didn't have people to go places or to sign up for some of these courses. So there is a lot of variables that play into that different account. And although at the start of the year we do try to get an indication from staff who's interested in attending what conferences, but again, we do wait till closer to when registration opens up and the agendas are made available to determine whether or not we should sign up for these things.
Okay, thanks. And just one last question on admin then, page 5. Can you, for the benefit of all of us, explain the difference between capital fund admin and consolidated reserve admin, and also explain the figure in the 2019 budget of $559,000 versus 5-figure numbers in the rest of the years? I'm assuming there's some anomaly in there, but I don't exactly know the difference between capital fund admin and consolidated reserve admin, so I'd just like to know what the...
So through the mayor to all of council, so the capital, again, partly because of the accounts, and part of the unpredictability of the accounts is that we flow one-time expenses through our everyday accounts, which makes it extremely hard to look back at historical data because we're not comparing apples to apples. Like, what we need to do is get all of our one-off things that happen and flow them through one-off accounts as opposed to our everyday accounts, so we really can drill down and see what what our everyday expenses are and what's normal. So that's definitely priority for the rest of this year. But the capital fund is through the levy, but directly towards capital in that current year. So it's not saved. The reserve is intended to be put in savings, essentially, so into the reserve, which would appear on the reserve schedule. So saved for the future, and the capital is it's an accounting entry is basically what it is. So it's coming from the tax levy, but we're spending it on capital, not on operating. And the 559, I believe that was when we received the one-time modernization. So we recorded it as revenue because we had to show it as revenue, but we didn't want it to offset it. We didn't want it to be part of the everyday budget because it wasn't. It was a one-off. So we directly turned around and contributed it to a reserve.
Thank you. That'll be all.
And thank you. And just in regards to conferences as well, we've been careful. I know I don't want to see people going to conferences for the sake of, a trip away and all that sort of thing. Because they do cost a fair bit of money. By the time you pay gas and hotel and food and everything, they're often a couple $1,000s. Even to myself, I've been very, very careful, and there's probably a few I should be going to that I'm not, simply to save some money for the taxpayer. CAO and I have had that conversation. It's important that we monitor those, and that the Wainfleet taxpayer is getting their money's worth when we do attend these conferences. And they haven't been too many, especially with COVID, obviously, but even online, I think emo was like $600 or something like that. It was considerable. But yeah, we do monitor that. I don't want the public thinking that we just, we go to these things just for the weekend away, and we actually do assess to make sure we're getting our money's worth, and it's important to me. So just a comment. Thank you.
And if I could, Mr. Mayor, just to build on that the admin budget, staff training and conferences covers actually 8 staff members in the admin departments, I guess, combination of corporate services, sorry? 9, I apologize, 9 staff. So that is the sort of annual budget for the corporate services as well as the administration side of things.
Right. So, yeah, it's not actually a lot, and when you really look at it. It's also very important, too. You have to balance the tax dollars with making sure your staff are trained and up to date on everything that they need to be up to date on. So, is there anything else in the admin section that we would like to have a look at? Okay, we'll move on then to the bylaw section. And is there anything in there that staff would like to, or council would like to look at and have discussion on? I do have one question. Medical marijuana licenses, $0. Can you explain that one to me, please? Will, or?
I can take a stab at it. Otherwise, I will leave it to the staff, the other staff, to provide. But bottom line is, one of the things with these licenses is we don't actually have a firm grasp, if you will, on the number of licenses that we should be expecting on a year-to-year basis. Unlike dog licensing or other types of licensing, Health Canada is quite close. They play the cards very close to their chest with respect to medical marijuana grow-ops. And as such, we do not currently have, call it a solid inventory of what the anticipated or expected revenues should be for those. We are currently in the midst of an FOI application to Health Canada to sort of identify properties where these licenses may or should be occurring. But, and then once we get those, we'll be in a position to sort of pursue them a little more strongly. But until that time, again, we just simply don't have a number that we can throw in as a reasonable year-to-year budget figure to anticipate revenues for. As such, we're basically not anticipating any revenues, and anything that does come in is a windfall in that regard.
So are they paying their tax bill, property tax bills?
By all means, they're paying property taxes, but the licensing fees. I believe we only have one grow-up that has actually gone through the full scope of getting a municipal license for their operations. The other comment that the treasurer pointed out to me, again, as she oversees the planning function at the moment, is that we do have that interim control bylaw in place right now, and that bylaw prevents any new operations from being established. So even if we did have a firm grasp of estimates, legally, they wouldn't technically be able to establish or get a municipal license until all the land use and zoning stuff is sorted out as well. So lots of balls in the air on that, and as such, we have highlighted the fact that there is a licensing regime in place, the fact that we don't have any historical trends that we can look to, and as such, any sort of revenues that we might get would be sort of a windfall, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan.
You, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, do we have a set fee for what it is for a license?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do. I don't know what it is, but hopefully we will have that information for you shortly.
I'm just curious. I didn't ever read it or see it anywhere, so. Yeah.
And we did lose one last week.
Is that legit?
It's gone.
No, but was it a legit one?
No.
No.
It's gone. So that was good. Okay, bylaw section. Anybody have questions in there? Oh, Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just a question around beaches, and we were thinking we might need a line item to cover that. I don't know if it comes under bylaw. And as we change bylaws, we sometimes do public meetings or other types of outreach. And is that also in this department?
It was difficult to hear you. Donna, can you repeat?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. I think it's probably maybe to the CAO or treasurer. We've talked in the past about perhaps needing extra or identifying some part of our budget for beaches and monitoring, or what we might be anticipating for next year, if anything. And then the second item was when we review bylaws, and sometimes we need public meetings or other outreach to do with bylaws. Are those covered in this department? Thank you. Did you hear that one? Sorry.
Yes, we did. Thank you. And actually, I think, was that today or yesterday, we had that discussion about looking after the beach issues this summer, if it was going to be like last summer. And there are funds going to be available for us to deal with that. And look to the treasurer.
Thank you. And then just about any public engagement costs. I don't know if they're in this department, or maybe it's already been covered in the previous department. Thank you.
Yeah, but look to the treasurer to speak to that.
So through the mayor to all of council, so the beaches, it does fall under recreation, so we will get to that later on in the budget process. And in terms of public engagement, I'm not sure what costs would be associated with that, but there is a legal fee budget as well as professional fees. So we would have some money to do some outreach to encourage the members of the public to voice their opinion on different bylaws. But generally most of the outreach is done in-house, and the costs for that are usually minimal.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Cridland?
No, thanks.
No. Okay, I have one question on page 9. To other agencies, livestock, 32,000.
So through the mayor to all of council, so that's our contract with the, it changed, Niagara SPCA, so for our animal control. So we have a contract with them, and that's the amount for the annual contract.
And is that dependent on how many calls they get, or is it just a flat rate fee for 1 year of coverage? Flat rate?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a flat rate.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions of bylaw? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to building. And I look to questions from councillors on the building.
So through the mayor, of council, so I'm not sure if we might want to start with Lee to do kind of a preamble on the strategic direction of the building department, and then council can follow up with any questions at that time.
Great, thank you very much. And Mr. Gudgeon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you and all members of council. As council knows, the Protective Services Department has been orienting itself towards increasing its service levels and efficiencies to meet the needs of our residents for many years now. In these changing times, more than ever, we need to have our eye on the horizon, not on our feet as we move forward. What this means in real terms is that we need to be ahead of the new realities and trends that are emerging in the region and in the township. The building and construction sectors are extremely active and vigorous, with local contractors reporting that barely 2 months into this year, they are currently booked solid until into the fall. We're expecting things to be busy. So this is certainly holding true here in Wainfleet, with our department currently sitting at fully 30% more permits than at this time last year. We have at least 4 large projects that will be taking place this year, which will add an immediate pressure to our normal high season in the department, the busy season. Council's aware that we've been streamlining the building department for the last couple of years and making process changes and finding new efficiencies to position ourselves for the future. Our current approach involves taking the next step in that progression by adding much needed depth to the department in the form of taking on a senior inspector in the building department. This position doesn't affect the tax levy in the township, as the treasurer mentioned earlier, as the building department is required by law to be funded from within itself, from within the building department, through the increased billing activity that is being projected and what we are seeing occurring. Currently, we're hiring retired inspectors and external consultants to try to augment the department. But this approach is becoming more troublesome because the demands for their services of the people that we're hiring, these retired inspectors and consultants, are increasing among other municipalities as well. And so they're becoming scarce as a resource as well. And availability is becoming more and more restricted. And, you know, it goes without saying this approach has disadvantages, such as what I mentioned, that having an in-house inspector will solve. The result that we're going to see is a higher level of commitment. Again, we're dealing with someone who is actually our employee. We'll have the ability to cover vacations, staff illnesses, and so on, all of which point to higher levels of predictable customer service to our residents. We're going to know what resources we have to allocate. We're going to be able to allocate those in a way that's going to provide the highest levels of customer service. Strategically as well, because again, putting on my HR hat, there's an HR side to this as well, in the sense that the township will also benefit in the longer term by not losing the accumulated knowledge that exists in the building department. Traditionally, in the past, in all departments, not just building, but in all departments, every time an employee leaves, especially an experienced senior employee, we lose a whole bunch of accumulated capital from within that department. So every time our inspector or CBO moves on, we start at square one all over again. We start with nothing and have to retrain. Having a system of teamwork and collaboration between our CBO and our senior inspector will help to ensure the accumulation and retention of knowledge within the township if and when such changes would occur. With this position being funded from building services provided and not taxes, the approach is self-funding and self-sustaining, both now and in the longer term. In short, Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's our plan that the addition of a senior inspector will increase the quality and availability of building services to our residents while providing value and stability to our department in the years to come. Thank you. So I'd be pleased to take any questions.
And I'll just, if I may, add a little narrative to what Lee has spoken to. My phone and my email rings, and I receive more emails with complaints about how long it's taking to get building permits. Today, yesterday, last week, 2 or 3, I'm on the phone a lot. And I've had discussions with Lee and Dave ongoing for months now about things. And they're not, it's not our staff. They're doing what they can do. But there needs to be a lot of permits come in without all the information, and there has to be some more service to the public to help them get what they need so it doesn't delay. It's a complicated, and there's a lot of reasons why there's troubles in getting things done. We're meeting the standards once we get the completed permits or applications, but there's just more. Secondly, I sat with Dave a few times, and the man is he's a very busy man, and you can see the stress load on him trying to keep up. So being that this is not a tax dollar issue at all, self-funded, and we do have a lot of growth starting to happen. We have businesses, we have lots of homes coming, and I'm seeing that for the future because that has been the general direction that we've taken as a council strategically, is to see some smart growth. I would hate to see our CBO get exhausted to the point where he walks out the door, because there's a lot of knowledge there. So that's my thought on it. We've had these discussions with staff and with the CAO and with Lee, and it would be a very smart move. The only question I have to our treasurer, if I may, ahead of you folks, is so we're paying for 2 CBOs, but we don't get enough funding in from the permits to cover the entire cost of the second CBO. How does that looked after?
So through you to all of council, so it wouldn't be an additional CBO, it would be more of a senior inspector, so they would take the inspection side of things off of Dave's plate, so he could focus on reviewing the permits and compliance issues and things like that. So it would create a more administrative role for the CBO, and the inspector would be more feet to the ground. They would be out doing inspections, likely the person that the residents would see out and about amongst the community. Dave would still be doing inspections as needed, obviously, and just with the 2 of them, they would be able to cover much more ground. But even on a very conservative, even using very conservative numbers and a conservative approach towards the number of permits, even if you look back historically, so in 2017, the revenues were 226,000. So with using a conservative approach, as well as the manager of protective services alluded to, there's a shortage of building professionals in the region, and a number of municipalities have additional work that they would be willing to buy service from us if it was trending like we weren't going to have enough permits to cover the expense of the wages, at which time we could sell out our services to neighboring municipalities, because the demand is increasing and there's just not enough of these individuals out there. So everyone is kind of sharing the same couple of retired fellows that are at one point going to actually want to retire. So then we're going to find ourselves in a precarious position.
Yeah, and we cannot afford to lose a CBO or inspector for any amount of time, because so many projects, as the fellow I was talking to on the phone the other day, every week it costs them money. So it's really important that this aspect of our township is looked after, and there's no levy to the taxpayer. So to me, it's a no-brainer. Any other questions on this aspect? Councillor Cridlin, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Again, thanks for the update, Mr. Gudgeon. That's really, we're getting ahead of it, and that's exciting. The questions were about, is this going to be a contract position initially, and or is it going to be just a normal HR probation type of intake? I'm just anticipating maybe a little bit of the unknown. So I think the treasurer already talked to how we can mitigate any risk to the taxpayer base, which is great. But again, we want this to be successful, and even all search efforts don't end up being successful. So could you just describe what that would look like over the short term? Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Crigdon and all of Council. Yeah, from an HR perspective, again, we would be casting our net widely. We would, we're trying, as we've talked about in years past, I mean, we are in many ways attempting to make Wainfleet an employment destination. And, there are things, benefits to working in Wainfleet that employees cannot get elsewhere. So again, we're trying to leverage what we have. We would be looking at, again, casting our net widely, making an attractive position that hopefully is going to appeal to the kinds of people that we're looking for, team players, highly qualified people who are looking for an environment. Those for whom top dollar is absolutely the be all and end all are going to find employment in the larger municipalities. But there are some people who hit far above their weight, much like a lot of our staff from an HR perspective, that we feel very confident we can attract. It would, as you mentioned, it would be a situation where we would hire on a probationary basis, as we do generally. So it would give us the room to assess not only the person on paper and from an interview perspective, but also live and in the field in a very real way. And we would have full leeway to conduct ourselves accordingly. So again, we're looking for someone who's going to fit and who's going to perform in the way that we need them to perform, to fit in not only with the department, but with the municipality.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of building? Councilor McClellan? No? Okay. Moving on. Oh. Certainly. Yep. 5-minute recess. Okay, great. We'll take a 5-minute recess here for some math to get done. Thank you. Okay, we have a short 5-minute recess, call this meeting back to order, and I believe Councillor Cridlin has a question regarding page 12 on the budget.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Probably just to treasurer, just to clarify, there's one line there. It's got mandatory septic inspections and it's got a credit of 30,000. So could you just explain the line? Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Cridlin. So again, when the accounts are reworked, we can change the naming on this, but in anticipation of the new position, we are hoping to come up with council direction, of course, some sort of solution to our boil water advisory. So with the revenues, when building has been working on this budget since last year, so the revenue figures have been calculated for the full year. So that was for a full year, which likely won't be realized at this point because we're already into March. So that would just be for some sort of inspection program being reinstated, similar to the legacy one. But that's still in the works. Like, they're going to work out the details of that, but they are anticipating some revenue being associated to some sort of inspection program at some point later this year.
Mayor, I'll just continue to close on that. So thank you. So really, what I'm hearing is it's a placeholder. We will see more activity. We will see more reports, and perhaps even later tonight. But that's clarified for me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Vliet.
we can't hear Councillor Cridlin on this side.
Oh. Okay, I was able to hear her there.
That was just a closing thank you, and it's a placeholder. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Van Vliet. Donna, can you do another count, just a 5 count, please? The questioning? Okay, that's finished. We'll move on to the fire budget. And is the chief there? You wish to address anything here, Chief?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The proposed 2021 fire operating budget presented this evening continues to provide the resources required to build and support fire protection services within the township. As the treasurer previously stated, the majority of the changes are results of council's previous directions in funding for the fire station, some adjustments or increases for insurance, and the addition of firefighters. As well, there was a change in the more accurate representation of projected revenues for 2021. But certainly, I'd welcome any questions from council.
Okay, we have a number of pages here of data. Questions? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to either the chief or the treasurer. Page 17, 2020 actuals. Should I infer that there's a $150,000 operational surplus by the bottom total fire numbers in 2020? 938 versus 787 actual. Is that?
I'm going to refer that one to the treasurer.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So the numbers reflect the actual expenses in terms of things that were incurred in 2020. However, there was some purchases made late in the year that will be adjusted back to 2020 because they were ordered but not paid for in 2020. So the expense will need to be allocated back. I do believe they'll still be in a slight surplus position, but it won't be as large.
Okay, so if I look at 2019, that should be pretty final. Does that mean that in 2019 it was close to 180,000?
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So there are some accounting that's not actual dollars, some just accounting entries that happen after the fact. However, due to the pandemic, our 2019 audit has actually not been finalized. It's scheduled for the first week of April. So the actual numbers will be forthcoming in the next month or so with the actual surpluses, and council will have the opportunity to direct staff where to allocate those.
Okay, and one final comment to the chief. Did I, on Monday, hear you correctly that if there's an operational surplus that you suggested that we apply it to the purchase of the truck? Did I hear that, or I'm not, I just want to clarify.
It is a strategy that could be used, but certainly the treasurer would seeing the global township needs would make the best recommendation on how to proceed with any surpluses.
Okay, thank you. And the 100,000, I think you talked about that at the beginning, at the end there. That's just the beginning of the pay down plan for the central fire station. It's not reflected in the potential debenture amount. It's for, like, how does it relate to the serial debenture versus where did this figure come from?
So if you remember in July, the treasurer put forth a report outlining the funding strategy or repayment strategy for the fire hall project. And in there, based on the approved budget amount, that doesn't mean that that's what the end bill will be. That's the target. That obviously we couldn't absorb the repayment in 1 year. That would result in, I believe it was about a 6 or 7% tax increase if we did it in 1 year. So the plan was to phase that repayment in through a combination of levy increases and a use of reserves to offset the repayment once the debenture hit the books. So this is phase one of that phase of the repayment plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions of fire? I believe Councillor Cridlin had a question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'll just build on what Councillor Gilmore was just saying then and clarify that the 100 there is then sort of like the expected estimate for the full year. That's not a partial year amount. That's set for the whole, that's the 12 months. It's if we started in January at the rate that we agreed to for the plan.
And you're
Right.
looking to,
Okay. Yeah, the funding strategy included 2% in 2020, 2% in 2022, and then whatever the remaining balance was required in 23. So to phase it in this year, we added $100,000 to the operational levy this year. We'll do the same thing next year, and then when the debenture hits the books for the fire hall project, we can then adjust the final for that repayment at that point.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
okay, Councillors McClellan or Van Vliet, any questions? Okay. Councillor McClellan?
So I just have one question of the fire chief, and it's not with this budget, but it's something that's bothering me, so I need to know. So maybe you can tell me, last year we asked Richard what was the look coming at us over the next 10 years for the roads and that, so we found out about bridges. Can you, and I'm not asking for it right now, but if you get it for us before Monday, what's the life expectancy left of Burnaby and Wellandport? And what else is coming up in the next 10 years? So, you know, for trucks, for other equipment that's coming, just so, you know, if you turn around and tell me that Burnaby needs a new fire hall in 3 years and Wellandport needs one in 5, makes a difference at how we look at things, right? So we need to know these, just so we set this up right.
Yeah, certainly. So if you remember last year, I believe this request came forward and staff did prepare a 10-year forecast, and that was presented at last year's budget. Certainly, I can go back through and find that and prepare that and share it with you again if needed.
That would be nice, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we'll look to the chief to do that, to share that document again. Any other questions regarding fire operating? Okay, I see none. Moving on to operations. And I look to our operations expert, Richard Nan, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, yourself and Mayor, members of council. As you can see, the roads operating portion, you'll see, I believe the next 5 tabs are all have to do with me. So instead of giving a speech for each one, I'll just do it now. Staff did spend quite a bit of time trying to adjust according to actuals or at least forecasted actuals through past history. Unfortunately, as you're aware, a lot of what we do has to do with Mother Nature's ability to change things on us. So as you can see in a lot of the budget line items, we try to anticipate some of the cost figures. But things like ditching, culverts, winter control, a lot of this is weather dependent, and a lot of this could be as a result of complaints due to weather related issues or safety related issues like culverts, for instance. They could be required replacements. We're coming to a stage where the next few years, obviously there's a lot of culverts that were installed at one time and they're starting to phase out at the same time. So we try to anticipate these things, but we also monitor the entire overall budget for each line item. And if we go over on one, we always try to adjust to make sure that we're going to be under on another one to make sure our overall figures are going to be palatable at the very end, so we stay within budget. You may, and I'll try and anticipate Councillor Gilmore's question. If you look at the line items in roads, for instance, it may appear like there's a huge surplus. Well, if you look closely, a lot of some of the revenues maybe are showing as a one-time revenue because they may be the result of a settlement or something like that, or grants that we don't anticipate getting. So it may appear that we have a huge surplus of $1 million, but it's because we had a settlement which brought in almost $1 million worth of revenue. So that's where it offsets costing. So overall budget, we did manage to come in for roads at a slight decrease, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good job on tweaking your mind reading skills, Richard. My first question is on page, shoot, now that I made the joke, I can't find it. It's the dust control. Sorry, I think I found it again. Page 21. Those numbers seem to fluctuate quite a bit, and this year it's 102,000. So I'm just wondering why it's fluctuating so much.
Through your worship, in the past 3 years since I've been here, we've received a lot more additional complaints for dust control, and it has been a lot hotter season. So there's a lot of areas where the dust control may have worked by putting it down the beginning of July, and we've had rain throughout the summer months that helps reactivate the calcium and keeps the dust down. If you have a very dry summer, we may have to make second applications, and that's why if you've noticed a couple of years in a row, we've had to put extra money towards that to maintain some sort of dust control to assist some of our residents in keeping that down.
Thank you. And if I can continue,
Yes.
I was wondering if we could have some kind of a, Richard, if you could do a list of roads monthly of what's going to be maintained, so people could just look on the website and see that my road's going to get graded or my road's going to get the potholes filled or what have you, so that people don't have to continuously keep calling and asking. I know I'm one of those people. So that's why I was wondering if we could get a list.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. By all means, and I know Councillor Van Vliet and I had spoken about certain items, and improving communications is certainly one of the things that we'd like to do. So that is a project that we will try to sit down and try to accommodate to provide the public transparency and an ability to see where things are happening and when. By all means, it's something we can look at for the coming year.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that because I know it's complaint driven, but before it gets to the point where it's complaint driven and becomes an annoyance for everybody who lives on all those roads that need to be maintained, we can be proactive. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I hear quite often too is dust, my road, my road's dusty, my road's dusty. And I know in one case I worked with the people for a little bit and we got extra calcium put on. They ended up moving in the end because we just couldn't keep the dust down. It really depends which side of the road you're on, of course, as well. If you're on the east side, you get that much more dust. And those ones need extra attention. So I can certainly understand why the costs there have gone up. And the summers have been dry, so you can see why it costs more money for that. Other questions? Councillor McClellan.
You, Mr. Mayor, to Richard. Under the ash trees.
Are you on
page 20?
20.
Cut that down any? Like we must be getting near the end of these trees. Yeah.
Through your worship, in consultation now, well, as you can see, last year we were slightly under on it because, as you're aware, because of COVID took place, a lot of businesses weren't allowed to operate. We were trying to save money the best we can, so we got a late start on a lot of the ash trees. But in speaking with staff and our contractors, we believe we still have about a third of our ash trees left. We're making good progress, and we're hoping the next couple of years we can reduce that. And we can always reduce it as council directs, obviously. But our plan is to continue working after the ash trees. And the old growth maples, etc., that are becoming hazardous as well in the township.
Any follow-up, Councillor McClellan?
No, I'm good on that. I have another question, if I may.
Okay, what page?
Same page, 21. Well, it actually goes on a lot of the pages, but it's probably a simple answer. I just don't know where it's going, and you can refresh us on it. If you go under ditching, the last line, it says just distributed equipment rental ditching. What is that? Because it seems to be on every patching, spraying, sweeping, it goes all the way along. So I'm just trying to figure out what that number is that keeps getting moved around.
So I'll take this one through the mayor to Councillor McClellan. So this is another thing that we are going to eliminate when we clean up the accounts. It is just an internal allocation. So at one point, it was to try to track costs, but they're never actually used for anything, and it's just moving money around from different places, and it makes it very hard to see what the actual costs were, what actual wages were, what the actual reserve contribution for a piece of equipment should be. So it is just an accounting allocation, okay. But it is very complicated and will be eliminated.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, probably to the treasurer. Just a couple of things. Fuel purchases on page 18. I assume that area is slated for cleanup because those numbers don't make any sense.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So again, that account is an in and out account. So it, through the year-end process, gets allocated to the different vehicles that used the fuel. Yeah. That's just where the purchases are allocated to initially.
Okay, my second question is page 24, third line, principal street lighting. Can you tell me why we didn't pay the principal in 2017, 18, and 19? That was budgeted for?
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So that was, in an effort to get this budget book with more than 1 year of previous data, it's a manual process from the accounting software, converting it over into this because there is no report that you can run that has multiple year data. I assure you that the debt payments have been made. The allocation just wasn't transferred over to this spreadsheet.
That's what I was hoping for. Thanks.
And
Okay.
that debt is finished now. That's why that the last year was last year.
Councillor McClellan.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I don't know if it'll be Richard or Mallory, but when you go on to truck descriptions, what is truck number 1? What is truck number 2? Is it a pickup truck? Is it a dump truck? Is it a three-quarter ton? We don't know what it is, right? I mean, I live in town, I come down here, I look at what's here, but I don't know what number is what, right? So it'd be kind of nice.
Okay.
And I kind of understand equipment, so I'm sure others are sitting here.
I look to the CAO is making notes on that for the future.
Yep.
Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could just add to that, if we're going to do a list like that, could we also get a life expectancy of when those trucks are going to be done?
I look to the treasurer,
So
please.
through the mayor to all of council, so we can certainly clean that up when we revisit the chart of accounts. And I do believe Richard already has a fleet forecast, so we can definitely share that with council. I believe it was shared through last year's budget process, but we have acquired some new fleet since then, so we will certainly recirculate that. If you have specific questions about what the truck numbers are right now, I also don't know, so I will have to defer that one to Richard.
Okay, so I don't feel so
Truck-
bad. So
Truck 1's a tandem, truck 2 is a single axle dump.
Of course, you know them all.
of course you know that. That's your job.
And while we're at that, if I could just interject for a second, for the public as well in the fire departments, station 1, 2, 3, and 4, it would be neat piece of information if you actually put down the location, because somebody down in Lakeshore doesn't necessarily know fire station 1 or 2 or 3, which is theirs. So if we could have that done, that would be also great, just for the public information as well. Councillor McClellan, carry on. Sir.
Yeah, so the one thing I would ask again, Richard, and I know with these storms, and you gave us a 10-year forecast for last year, but I'm sure things may have changed. Maybe they're the same, but if you could give us that again, or just add anything that has to go on there, so we kind of know again what's coming at us. So whether it's us or somebody else, it'd be nice to set things up so they're not in the boat we were when we came here.
Sorry, that was for the
So the
storm?
bridges, last year we talked about the bridges, but I don't know if there's culverts that are washed out or end treatments or anything that's changed, right? Or if some of the bridges changed or that type of thing. So if there's any big expenses that are coming up in the next 10 years that need to get added to that.
Okay, I see our Richard is making some notes. Noted and nodding his approval, so we can look for that. Are there any other questions on, what are we on here? Roads. Councillor Cridlin, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It might not be roads. So do we have access to his whole department yet? Not quite.
Well, we have building, rec, cemetery, and drainage to go yet under Richard's departments.
Well, okay, I'll try this topic here then, see if it works. Under ash trees, but it's not ash trees. So I mentioned it briefly at the last review around reserves. So I know this is ash trees that we're taking down, but for the settlement that we got, the reserve settlement for the tree settlement, can we talk about at the end, perhaps, then some component of that reserve that goes into restoring trees in the municipality? So it can be the withdrawal amount. By withdrawal amount, there'll be a very easy way to do it, I'm sure, and it obviously fits under Richard. So I don't have any money for it yet other than what's in the reserve fund from the settlement. So I'll just wait for an appropriate time to talk about that further.
No, actually, that's an excellent question because the ash trees is under roads, and I see the treasurer has her hand up. I think you have an answer for you. you.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Cridlin. So again, that will come forward with the year-end accounting after the audit. So that money was received in 2020. So that will come forward with a recommendation, which I've already slotted it in the reserve schedule just to show that that money's there and it didn't go into regular operations. It has been earmarked. At which point council can determine a strategy for those funds. So we wanted to set them aside so that we could think about what the strategy was, how much money we wanted to allocate to potentially creating a new tree planting program, but that will be at council's direction. So you'll have the opportunity to discuss that and give staff some direction at that time.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, anything more on roads? Seeing, Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard. Along with the list that we asked for trucks, can we get the same thing with all mobile equipment?
Yep.
You mean like
Thank you.
Tractor 9 and Tractor
Like
8?
Tractor 9, Tractor 9A. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, we're moving on to building maintenance, if there's nothing more for roads. And Richard, building maintenance, you've already spoken to it, so we look for comments or questions on building maintenance. Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm going to try this one on page 32 and 33, the 4 fire halls. We, again, maybe it's along the same principles as Councillor Gilmore was bringing up, but we have a maintenance amount in there of, small amounts, but it's times 4. We are, we're working on the capital side to do improvements. And still having this pool for maintenance. I obviously don't want it to come back to us if it's something that has to stay there and then increase later. But I would say we could cut those 4 by like half. Very soon we're not going to be putting very much into 1 and 2 anyway. So maybe Richard could just comment whether this is the year to take a few dollars out of there.
Through your worship to Councillor Cridlin, the issue becomes with these fire halls is we've been sitting on the fence with these fire halls for many years, deciding whether we're going to build Burnaby, whether we're going to close one, whether they're going to build the central. So we left a lot of the building maintenance off the books. Like we have the money there, and we're sitting there going, okay, we need to fix it. Oh, wait a minute, we're going to tear it down. So why fix it? So we've been playing this game, and now we've into the point where we've decided this year, like for instance, the septic tanks, the septic beds are falling apart. So we've placed tanks. So we are sinking some money into the capital, which also means that we are going to spending some money additional on the general maintenance. COVID played a big role this year, but things like a lot of the halls weren't being used for toilet papers and cleaning supplies and light fixtures and filters for the furnaces, like various items like this. This year again was low because nobody was in the fire halls, and the chief, only time he allowed the guys in the hall was when they were responding to a call. So they didn't use it a lot this year. So I could see us spending more money on maintenance as we're going to be, like we're sinking money in capital. So now we're going to be sinking money under general maintenance to actually increase as well. I mean, some of it eventually will drop because once we switch things over to, for instance, LED lighting that you'll see in capital, a lot of them have a longer lifespan. So you'll see some of the general being able to be dropped. I just think it probably potential would be next year that you may see some of those costs decrease.
So through the mayor to all of council, in addition to that, with it being lower last year, some of them we actually increased this year due to the fact that we did postpone one of Richard's, the mower attachment. So we did get quotes for contracting out the grass cutting service because as I understand it now, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually drive the tractor to mow the lawn to these fire halls, which is putting a lot of wear and tear on the tractor. And for a reasonable price, we can actually outsource the fire halls which will get us more life out of the tractor that we currently have, since we did delay doing any upgrades to the capital as presented on Monday. So there is built in there, it's anywhere between $1,700 to $2,700, depending on the bigger fire halls, for the whole year for the grass cutting service. So that's going to come from that budget line as well.
Thank you both. I'm just going to clarify that it wasn't for the whole amount. So I was only looking at the general maintenance number. So there's a 5,500, a 5,000, a 5,500, not the bottom for each amount. And the other thinking was in the capital, you know, there's going to be two what looks to be rather significant activities happening, you know, again, dealt with separately. So I just, you know, as these two fire halls retire, I can see leaving everything the same for fire hall 3 and 4, but just sort of then questioning the 5,500 and the 5 out of the general pocket while we're actually capital spending the same year. I see the chief's ready to clarify for me. Thank you.
That 5,000, Councillor Cridland, that goes towards the grass cutting. Also goes to the snow removal. It also goes to any of the smaller items. So, like Richard said, you know, we end up, we need cleaning supplies. That's all that general maintenance items that get addressed there. So until we're in a new facility, we have to operate these fully functional. This isn't, these are operating out the station.
Thank you. I tried.
Sorry.
Are you okay with that response, Councillor Cridland, or do you want to keep going on reduction there?
No, thank you. You know, there's a lot of detail in these numbers, and the staff have some excellent answers. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Building maintenance. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any. We'll move on to recreation. And Richard has anything more specific there, Richard, about recreation or?
Through your worship, no, I mean, obviously, everybody's aware we took a major hit this year with COVID and the closing of some of our facilities. As Mallory pointed out, we didn't want to show actuals, obviously, because then we wouldn't be able to increase that coming next year. Like if you turn around and say, well, we lost all the revenues, let's show that. Then all of a sudden next year, I'm going to be looking for a 3% tax increase. So it doesn't work that way. And plus we're hoping that some of those cost revenue losses that we're having will actually be, paid back to us, potentially some additional funding that they've been discussing at a provincial level.
Okay, thank you. Questions then in regards to recreation? Okay, I see no hands. Everybody's happy? Okay. Oh, Councillor Cridland there. I was looking at you and then I must have looked away.
No,
Councillor
I was a
Cridland.
little slow on that. I wanted to make sure that, you know, again, in this one, I will go the opposite. I see that there's conferences, staff training. Is there staff there that can take training? Is that it? Like, do we actually have staff in that column that's available and might take training?
Through your worship to Councillor Cridland, yes, there is ongoing certification that the guys have to take for the refrigeration plant, but we also do training based on our ongoing training. So we have mower and certification training and refresher training on safety for the fuels, etc. And then there is a conference that we were actually hoping to attend last year. And it has to do with turf management, and but everything's gone virtual. And at the time last year, we weren't able to participate virtually. We weren't set up for it yet, but staff will be taking things like turf management, arena operations courses, etc., put on by Parks and Recreations.
Thank you. And I'll just continue if I may, Mayor.
Certainly.
Thank you. And again, page 38, I see you do have, we've added a new line then for the beaches, the township beaches. Is that, again, should we have a little bit of discussion around that, or are we happy with that number? Based on what we learned last year. Thank you.
I would probably refer this to Mallory because this was actually implemented just because of what we went through this year. So how it was allocated and how it was set up, I would probably refer to the treasurer for that.
So through the mayor to all of council, so similar to our previous account issues as mentioned, historically any of the beach expenses used to flow through our village parks, which dealt with any parks, the cenotaph, as well as the beaches. So last year with increased demand, increased expenses, and pressures from residents and on council to try to make a decision in terms of what our stance was on the beaches, how active we wanted to be involved in running them. Did we want to increase the service, decrease the service? With those types of conversations happening behind the scene, we created some additional accounts just to try to track some expenditures. But we did it partway through, so we don't have a full year of data because they are still kind of combined between those three accounts still. So it is entirely council's direction what we would like to do with the beaches. We did allocate some of our, we did receive a tourism grant, which we allocated some of that last year to offset the cost, which means we do still have some of our COVID government funding from last year, which we are, I guess it depends if council anticipates this being an ongoing issue or if we think that it's kind of a short-term issue as a result of COVID, or if there is dollars that we want to maintain in the budget. If we do anticipate it being kind of shorter term, we do have some COVID dollars that we can offset that with, and there is rumors of further funds coming from different levels of government. So we were hoping to offset that if we anticipate that this is more of a one-off. And I will turn it over to our CAO.
Look to the CAO there, please.
And just further to that, Mr. Mayor, through you to council, over the course of the last several months, staff have been working on beach issues. We've been liaising with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority with respect to operations that occur at Quarry Lake. We've been in touch with the Niagara Regional Police, Port Colborne Detachment, who cover us. And we are working on bringing a report back to you prior to, once we get through budgets and prior to May 2-4 weekend hitting, so that you will have before you sort of a plan or at least an outline of the intent of how we can react or how we can prepare for any potential issues that might be coming our way this year. Again, 2020 was a very weird year from a COVID perspective. Certainly, everything was exaggerated, whether that was issues that we've had in the past or things that have been quiet were extremely quiet, things that were problems in the past were extremely problems last year. So we're also trying to, I guess, forecast, if you will, where we're going to end up this year with COVID and everything else. So again, that plan will be coming forward in the next, I would say, 60 days or so. And at the same time, as indicated by the treasurer, we do anticipate there being some monies available from a reserve perspective, from money we have on hand that would be able to accommodate anything if and when we need to expend those funds.
And just to add to that, thank you, Mr. CAO, but there is some chatter about some more COVID funding coming sometime, so that would be very applicable for us to use if we get it for all our beach issues. Councillor McClellan?
Yes, so just to speak to that, they found a place last year, so they'll be back this year. They didn't forget where they were going. So it's at least going to be a problem again this year. Maybe if beaches open up all around the place, it'll be a different story. But I would say we're going to have it this year. But I have a question and this is probably to the treasurer, but on the regional beaches, we spent almost $21,000 there last year. Do we get reimbursed that, or why are we paying for the region's beach?
So,
They pay it? Okay.
so through the mayor to Councillor McClellan, so you'll see we actually likely spent more than that. It's just, like I said, amongst those other lines. But one of the revenue lines at the beginning of the revenue is funding from the region. We do bill back. We have a contract with them to operate it, and they do pay the expenses for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on recreation? Okay, I'm looking at Councillor Cridlin because I always seem to miss her hand being up, but it's not up. Okay, so we'll move on to cemeteries. Okay, any pretty much self-explanatory there. Any questions on cemeteries? Grass is the big issue there. Nods Richard, yes. Any questions? Councillor Cridland? Okay. Good. Flipping over to drainage. Is there some background noise there?
So I apologize. That was me flipping the paper.
Oh, no problem. Drainage. Any concerns, questions? We don't have Mark on, do we? Oh, okay.
Mark is
Mark,
available.
our drainage superintendent, is there anything you'd like to speak to, Mark?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, nothing really to speak to. Few less expenditures this year due to COVID. We weren't able to host the open house or Drainage Superintendent Association meeting or do our usual mail outs. So there were some reductions in 2020 that anticipate being able to do some of those things again in 2021, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or concerns? Drainage. One of the most important aspects of life in Wainfleet is good drainage. Okay, I see no questions. And we'll move on to planning. Sarah, she's here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps before Sarah joins us, I could just take a stab at speaking to the planning budget because this budget, similar to the building budget, we are proposing a staff position in the document that you have before you. And what we're envisioning is a management level position to support the planning function that we have going on within the township. In reviewing the department and its operations, we do acknowledge that planning volumes do fluctuate from year to year, and COVID times of the application volume was down marginally. However, as with building activity, we're seeing a lot more interest being generated in planning. And firstly, we're seeing those in numbers alone. As of today, this month, we have already surpassed or equaled the number of consent applications that we had the entire year last year. And likewise, from a zoning bylaw amendments perspective, we are also on par or on target to see more applications coming in. In addition to those sort of consents and zoning bylaw applications, we have had expressed interest to us regarding condominium applications, plans of subdivision, and so on. And to be clear, those applications are being driven by the community. They're not us going out and asking people to come in and apply for applications. They are being driven by the community, and they are being driven by market forces. And the fact of the matter is that while historically our planning department has been sort of reactive and dealing with a very sort of sedate and quiet planning environment, things right now are definitely heating up. In addition to the volumes increasing, we are seeing the complexity associated with all the applications becoming greater as well. The complexity deals with not only external agencies such as NPCA or Ministry of the Environment or Ministry of Natural Resources, but they also deal with provincial policy statements, revisions to regional official plans, so on and so forth. Altogether, those are putting a significant strain on the capacity of us to be able to respond and to be able to maintain the service level that our constituents are demanding. In addition, we are finding a need to have to review our own policies and programs that we have in place in order to ensure the sort of long-range sustainability of the township. Whether those are dealing with intensification or hamlet boundaries or expansion of industrial lands, those are all things that people are coming to us saying we need to look at addressing these. And in the past, we have been reactive and tried to deal with those situations as they come to us. But again, as mentioned by Lee when he was discussing the pressures on building, we need to be a little more proactive in dealing with these matters as they come before us. And again, just on the topic of building, oftentimes, I mean, not oftentimes, all those building permits and all those building applications, before they can become building applications, those processes all have to flow through the planning department as well. So in the same way that building is getting stressed, the planning department is as well. One other component that I'd like to bring to everyone's attention, and again, we just recently made mention of the TAO, the Tourism Initiative funding that we were able to receive to help offset some of our beach operations and so forth. The township last year had coordinated with some of our local neighboring municipalities to re-kickstart the Niagara South Coast Tourism Association. Again, we were able to secure some funding to assist with that, but the township's participation in that effort has sort of been run off the corner of my desk, off the corner of Lee's desk in Human Resources and Protective Services, because frankly, we were basically the only two in the organization that were able to devote some time to those efforts. And TAO and the South Coast Tourism Association are focusing on economic development opportunities for the township, and economic development opportunities is another thing that we as a township need to be able to pursue and focus on long term in order to maintain us as a stable municipality, maintain us as a sustainable municipality moving forward. So that being said, I've actually sat down with Sarah and she's prepared sort of a forecast, if you will, of some of the issues and projects that we have coming online over the course of the coming year, 12 to 18 months, so on and so forth. Those include currently an interim control bylaw that we have for zoning with respect to cannabis facilities. We have housekeeping amendments being required for the zoning bylaw to deal with mapping errors and mapping issues. Likewise, text errors and text errors. In the zoning bylaw itself. We have some hamlet zoning issues that need to be dealt with, and we're also in the midst of implementing a new GIS system for the township built on the region's ESRI system. In addition to sort of those policy-related initiatives, we have a number of large planning and development-related applications that are coming forward and in the works. Again, Lakewood has recently had its application deadline extended, but that is certainly one that's going to be coming forward in the near future in one form or another. Marshville Drive is a new subdivision that's been recently approved, but is in the midst of ramping up. There's a quick mix expansion facility occurring over on Highway 3. We have Mr. Ben Berg's development that's happening over in Chambers Corners. There's a quarry expansion that's happening that involves our combined effort along with a number of other municipalities and the JART process, which Sarah had spoken to. That's the joint, and we'll get into that. Likewise, we have Long Beach Resort has a site plan that's proceeding. We have various trailer parks throughout the township. There's a new school coming on board. Wainfleet, we anticipate a number of subdivision and/or condominium applications coming forward as well. So to summarize, there's a whole bunch of work coming down the pipe, being driven by community demand, being driven by the real estate market, being driven by a variety of external factors. And what we're proposing as a new position in the planning department, starting mid-year, that would participate at the SLT level and at the area planners level. So we're talking a management level position. The focus of the position that we envision is one that is focusing on policy projects, such as official plans at the region, changes to provincial policies, and incorporating those or addressing those within our own plans and policies. The role would also envision including economic development activities that will help attract or strengthen the township's position to be able to attract industrial and or commercial type operations or large-scale agricultural operations that perhaps will bring us additional opportunities for sustainability. And finally, dealing with other sort of council priorities that might come along, including matters such as short-term rentals, opportunities for commercial and industrial growth, and so on. So we have that in the budget for you, for your consideration. Again, it's a 6-month time frame that we've sort of budgeted for, and it would become sort of a full-time position and would be going from there. We'll try to answer any questions. Again, I know Mallory has been involved intricately in assisting in developing the estimates, and Sarah likewise has provided input as the planner into the whole process. So we're at your disposal.
And Will has covered that off in every aspect. I just add my 2 cents that I've also seen the need for an additional person. If you look at, the building and planning virtually are tied in balance with each other. As Will said, every building permit has to run through planning, and she has quite a workload and not able to deliver as fast as we can, or it could be more efficient simply by adding another person. So we talked about this probably 3-4 months ago. I approached Will about it, and we said, we need another person here in planning because she is got a lot of work. So. And then they have fine-tuned it from there and worked out some numbers. So, like I say, I've seen it, and it causes me pause. When you see somebody who works half the weekend, sometimes sending me stuff on a Sunday afternoon when she shouldn't be working, and the dedication is tremendous from Sarah. But you always have to worry about burnout. You always have to worry about other aspects of becoming unhappy at her job. So. She's fantastic. I'm just saying that could be down the road if we don't give her some assistance. So it's my 2 cents worth. Questions, please. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could this be something we talk in closed? I have a couple ideas, but I'd rather do it in a closed session at some point. Doesn't have to be tonight, but.
Okay, I'll look to the CEO for guidance on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If we're talking just general budgetary related, we may or may not be able to go into closed. Again, there are very specific provisions under the Municipal Act which allow us to proceed. If we're dealing with negotiation matters or personal matters regarding identifiable individuals, again, there's a whole list of them. My suggestion is that we may very well be able to. If we want to perhaps discuss the general provisions of the planning budget, maybe take a 5-minute recess after that. I can talk to the counselor to see whether what his suggestion is qualifies as closed session discussion, then we can resume. Or alternatively, we can deal with it at a future meeting by all means. And perhaps we focus on sort of like the numbers right now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so then we may look to see something there in the future from Councillor McClellan, or a discussion in the future during a closed session.
I'll just put it out here now. I'm looking at this, and maybe we should be hiring consultants, because you get a whole spectrum when you go through a consulting firm, that planning consultants. You get guys that are good at this, you get people that are good at this. It's like going to a good law firm, right? There's 8 different lawyers, you get them in different things, and it's, you pay for the expertise, but it's on a contract basis, and there are lots of really good ones out there. And then if Sarah needs them right now for this year or 2 years, and then things slow down, or you just put them on a contract.
Okay.
I think we would be better served that way, because I don't think we'll ever get the expertise we want for what we're going to need coming up shortly with what's coming down the pipe. We need some senior advice and experience.
Okay, I'll look to the CO comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I put it that would certainly be an item for discussion at a future meeting. Again, there is rationale, as the treasurer indicated earlier. One of the projects that we had undertaken in 2020 was an organizational review that attempted to sort of look at and examine various areas of our operations. That is a document that we intend on bringing forward to you to sort of reinforce and identify some of the highlights that I just touched on here, and sort of that supports our rationale for moving forward. So we'll certainly be able to share that with you moving forward. Again, it will be a confidential document at this stage because of its very specific identification of individuals and so forth. But again, whether we're working with additional consultants or whether you're working with a staff, there's still a monetary allocation that would need to be a company, or need to accompany either of those options. And I guess at this stage, we've sort of shoehorned that monetary allocation into a staff position. Whether or not that shifts after council's consideration or discussion, again, we can come to that. But whether it's money for a consultant or money for a staff person, again, staff's recommendation is that we actually look at that staff person, because again, it's so much better to have that expertise available to us in-house rather than sometimes having to go out and search for it when you need it. Again, it gets back to the matter of being reactive versus being proactive. And again, we want to try and make the township be ready and proactive where we can. But again, open for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, definitely a future discussion. Councillor Van Vliet, and then Councillor Cridland.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is just more of clarification for the general public that might be watching. I hear a lot that in the last 15, 20 years, our population hasn't really grown, but we have more staff here. But we also have a lot more policy, procedure, and legislation that comes down. So what would have taken 2 or 3 steps 10 years ago now could take 10 to 15 steps. It's to no fault of anybody in this building. It's all legislated to us. It's all policy and procedure that everybody has to follow. So I just wanted to make that clear, that we're doing what we have to do to follow procedure, and it's the law. It's not us.
Thank you. And Councillor Cridland, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thanks for those comments, Councillor Van Vliet. I was just also thinking about the public and their interest probably in this very significant decision. Maybe just for the benefit of the councillors, you had a great list there, CAO. If you have something like that handy, it'll really help when people perhaps call and just got wind of it through a second, third party. So it's a great list that you've got, and I know it doesn't include everything. I don't know if I heard the operation, the official plan review that's also down the pipe. I think you might have touched on that. I know it's happening at the region and the province. There's other strategic stuff that we could do if we had the right amount of FTE that we needed to do it. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cridlin. And that's one thing that I've been looking at since I've got in this role is not the tactical everyday stuff is important, of course, but where are we going strategically 5 and 10 and 15 years down the road? And the work that we do now with a long view will set us up to be in very good shape in even 7-10 years. We're going to be, this township is going to be very well placed as growth continues and people do migrate into the Niagara region and us. So it's important that you do have the long look, and that's been one of the things that I've been paying attention to since we started. So it's nice to be ahead of the curve, not trying to always catch up. And trying to catch up is a hard place to work from. So it's nice if we can get ahead of the curve, then that's great. Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to see where I see the employee wages that's in here. Where are we proposing the new person's wages come from?
Look to the treasurer for that.
So through the mayor to Councillor McClellan. So they are in that wage figure.
That line item that goes across, so?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. You're not going to get a senior person.
I'm sorry, what was that, John? I couldn't hear you.
We're not going to get a senior person that's done all of this.
So through the mayor to Councillor McClellan, so that's so the
6 months.
increase is half a year's salary because there's no sense budgeting for a full year at this point because we're already into March, and by the time we were able to investigate the roles and responsibilities of that type of position, create a job description, do a job posting and a recruitment, it'll likely be halfway through the year before we can get that person in place. So we've only allocated half of the salary.
Okay, so that takes us to the end. Library, we've already finished. Is there any more questions on planning? Councillor Gilmore.
I have a couple questions about planning and one comment. Whatever direction we go as far as planning, either way, I'm comfortable with you allocating the money, but we do have to have a discussion about it. I concur with Councillor McClellan. My questions are regarding, on page 45, publications and subscription planning. What went on in 2020 that we budgeted 1,000 and spent 11,500? And what exactly is publications and subscription planning anyway?
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, another poorly named account for starters. However, when the subscription with the region when the agreement, I guess, for the GIS was first agreed upon, basically the long and short of it is we weren't invoiced and it wasn't fully implemented when we first signed the agreement. However, that's 2 years of the GIS system that's in there.
Okay, my second question is surrounding professional fees planning. I think I understand 2017. The rest of the years I don't understand. I assume that would surround consulting fees. But in years 18, 19, and 20, we levied 75,000 and spent 7,500. So am I correct that that's consultants that we didn't use, maybe anticipated but did not use?
Yeah, so I will turn this over to Sarah momentarily, but through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. It is for consultants, and Sarah can speak more to why it wasn't reduced and what she does plan on doing with that in the future. I know the unfortunate part sometimes about using consultants is they're not familiar with all of the township documents. So Sarah has to spend a significant amount of time to even engage a consultant to explain the process and what it is that she's hoping they can do. And with the current volumes, we are kind of just staying afloat and dealing with the day-to-day because they are quite significant, and just not everything is tied to an application. Even the amount of inquiries that come in from residents, the volume is increasing daily. So some of the things weren't done last year, COVID as a result of it as well. But yes, that is intended for consulting fees, and I will turn it to Sarah if she is there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So Mallory's correct. So that line is for consulting fees. As you mentioned, 2017, we were close to the budgeted amount, and that was due to the Lakewood project. So we had a consultant on board to help me with that file, which came to council in 2017. And then the spending throughout 2018, 2019 were kind of one-offs when I needed some additional assistance, either reviewing an application or for a project. But as Mallory mentioned, there's still a lot of project management and oversight when you hire a consultant. And so some of the projects that were intended in terms of getting a consultant on board, still a significant amount of time for me to project manage that and coordinate. So that's some of the reason for the not spending it. But we've always kept it at the same level in case that there are needs throughout the year. And so as William mentioned, we've got a number of projects coming up that have taken a couple of years to get to where they are now. And so that budget line item has been held in anticipation for some of those projects coming forward. For example, the quarry expansion, we started to talk about that back in 2018, and it seemed like they were close to making an application back then, but it's taken a significant amount of time. And so now it's looking like 2021 is going to be the year. So in terms of budgeting for those on an annual basis, I've wanted to retain as much there as possible in the event that those applications start getting off the ground. However, sometimes they've been delayed. And so reducing it could potentially have an impact if we get a lot of these applications coming forward and additional consultant work is needed.
Thank you. I'm not suggesting that we reduce it. I'm more suggesting that we use the 63 some odd thousand dollars that would have went into reserve from 2018, 19, and 20 to offset the amount that we're budgeting for in 2021. Like, it's just an ongoing example of, I don't know where this money goes to, but I assume that it stays in the department in a reserve, and yet we had enough money after halfway through 2019 to fund all the money that we spent in the entire 4 years. So it's just an ongoing concern that I've had for a long, long time, as the treasurer and the CAO well know.
Okay, I look to the CAO to speak to that.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, as was mentioned by the treasurer earlier, when there is a sort of unexpended surplus, if you will, at the end of the year, for the most part, those funds do not stay with that department. They revert back to council for direction on where the unexpended funds may go from a corporate perspective, so that those unexpended funds from account number 3360, professional planning fees, do not rest with professional planning fees. At the end of the year, if there is an overall surplus from the organization, that is allocated by council following the sort of year-end and audit process. So if there was money that was left over at the end of those prior years, council in those prior years said that surplus goes to this account. And it's usually a general catch-all account that any department, any organization, any need within the township can access.
Councillor Gilmore, follow up? Okay, any other questions? Councillor Cridland? No, we're all good?
Yep.
Okay, so that just takes us down to one last thing. We're finished the library aspect of that. So I had a conversation with the CAO about our grant policy, which we had a $0 allocation this year. After that last meeting, I was looking at that and thinking, we were just thinking about organizations that wouldn't require funding because of nothing going on. I realized that Pathstone had come, mental health had come and presented to us, and I know Councillor McClellan was very much in favor at that time of allocating some funds to them, because now more than ever, mental health is a big issue all over, everywhere. So I thought that we should bring that back up and have a discussion on that. And also hospice as well came to us and asked us about giving an annual donation to them for the next 5 years. So I simply wanted to bring this back for reconsideration. It's not even reconsideration technically. It's just to have a discussion to see whether we should take a second look at those and maybe just go through it and see if there's any others in here that would benefit during this COVID period of receiving funding. So I open it up for conversation. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Pathstone isn't on this one, but I definitely support that. Our kids are our future. You know, if there's, with all the shut-in time these children have had, and they can't play sports, they can't see their friends, they can't do that. If there's somebody in need, at least for a couple of years, we should get this thing going and see what happens and see what the uptake is on it. I've got a couple of suggestions on it, but I'll talk to somebody in the office here first before I...
Yeah, I can't remember the dollar amount they asked for, but it was involving an actual office here in Wainfleet, a drop-in center and a staff.
We need to give them an office.
Look to the treasurer to speak to that.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor McClellan and all of council, at the time that the grants were presented before council, it was identified that that was missed on that sheet because they didn't submit a grant application. So they did appear as a delegation before council, but they didn't actually complete the grant application process. Their initial request, which was dated for 2020, was $20,000 and a space to operate an office out of 1 day per week. With that being said, I know some neighboring municipalities that have contributed to them, and it was $20,000 per year. So now that we're in 2021, they contributed $40,000 for last year and this year. So I haven't spoke with Pathstone directly to confirm or deny that fact myself. That's just what I've heard from what's happened in some other municipalities. But we can certainly, if council directs, we can certainly reach out to see what the funding model looks like, and if there's alternative options for some level of service for maybe a lesser contribution, or if there's any alternatives available to us and the residents.
Okay, thank you. That's, any other comments on that one, Pathstone?
Personally, like I said, if there's one we're going to support, that's the one I think is the one to do with our
thank
kids.
you.
Yeah.
And then again, hospice has also that presentation, and whether we have any interest in giving that any support or any other ones on the list here. If we apply the filter of, it can help them during COVID. Like I say, last time we just applied the filter, nobody's going to need it because nobody's doing anything, so we just gave 0. And as I looked at that afterwards, I thought, well, there are organizations that need to benefit at this time. And so I just wanted to bring that back, and if there was any consideration for anything more, I'd love to hear it. If not, then we'll stay status quo. Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, so one question for you. This Wainfleet Seniors, I thought that was going to get put into one of the other accounts, so that was put into a recreation account or something. We talked about that last year, so that it,
I had a conversation with them, actually, and they were content to hold on to the funds. They wanted to give it back. And I said, where is it now? They said it was in their bank account, and they're just leaving it sit there. And I said, well, just leave it sit there, and then we won't allocate any for you this year. So that'll be what they, when they start. So they already have their money
So
for
they're
the
good
next
for
one.
this year.
Same thing, so that's the conversation I had. Will?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to advise that I was contacted by the Wainfleet Agricultural Society today, and they will be following up with members of council, I believe via email or correspondence over the coming days. Just again, hoping to keep options open because 2020 was a COVID year. A lot of things were canceled or deferred. But 2021, I think there's a lot of community interest in getting things going again. And again, the form of that will depend on a whole bunch of COVID-related criteria. But the key takeaway that I got from that message was that if council could just be aware that as the year progresses, there may be demands or there may be community groups wanting to try to initiate projects or initiatives that really do benefit the community as a whole, and they may need to approach council for assistance, whether that's in the way of in-kind donations or otherwise. But again, just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention as well.
So how do we go about putting some reserves aside in case, suddenly the fair goes, Marshville goes? I know for a fact the Volkswagen Festival has been delayed for another year, but some of these other events may take off and they need our funding as per every other year. So, Mallory?
So through the mayor, or through you to all of council, so there's a couple of options. I mean, it kind of goes against Terry's point of levying for no reason or for an unknown reason or maybe an unlikely reason. So you could leave them in there knowing that next year, when COVID is hopefully not a thing, they will be applying because some of these applications are annual. So we know that they will resume once COVID measures soften. Or alternatively, we could say that it's unlikely any events are going to happen. And if requests do come forward, council could direct us to fund them through use of reserves so that we're not levying unnecessarily. Those are the options available to council.
Okay, thank you. And I look to Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, here's the thing with me. Everything that comes to us, and whether it's here or personally, has merit. Every request. What we have to do is figure out how to stay in our lane. A lot of these, not a lot of these, but a couple of these I support personally. My problem has always been with the grants program. It was, completely out of control a number of years ago when we were up in the $50,000. But my problem generally is that I don't see the township's role, the council's role, to be the philanthropic or the designated charitable decision maker for the residents of the township. I don't see that as our role. So, well, I felt that possibly going to zero this year was a touch on the harsh side. What it did was set the table for us to have a look at exactly what we're doing and to figure out how we're going to just strictly stay in our lane. We have to be careful that we don't start funding social programs. That's not the municipality's role. That's for other levels of government. So the health system, we all fund every week when we get a deduction on our paychecks. Other agencies on this list are registered charities, and providing that the information is publicized, that there's a need, or they do the legwork like Heart and Stroke and the Cancer Society, etc., reach out. Like the Heart and Stroke Foundation just because I collected for a while, does really well in Wainfleet. Wainfleet people are very generous, and quite frankly, per capita, the people, when we had our year-end meeting, would say that we give away, Wainfleet residents give away more than lots of other people. So I want to just take this chance to reset and figure out, okay, we're going to fund all our internal stuff, the fair and things that belong to Wainfleet. The rest of them, not that they're without merit. I'm not going to suggest that for 1 minute. However, we need to figure out refigure out what our role is and stay in our lane and not become the designated decision maker for the charitable contributions of the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you. Definitely, yeah, there is a line in the sand that we have to establish where that is. Wainfleet items, of course, are near and dear to us. The fair, the seniors, agricultural, those are very important things. So Councillor Gilmore's comments are noted. Is there any other comment from anyone? Councillor Cridland? Councillor McClellan, go ahead.
Yeah, so, again, I agree with Councillor Gilmore on this, but I look at, we're supposed to get one request from each organization. The Agricultural Society's got $6,000 in for funds to help the annual fair. They got $15,000 in for tables and a cart to pull the tables around in. And they got another $4,600 in a fee waiver for the rental of the arena. That's the things I see is we should be waiving the fee. I can give them that. The rest of this, go to the farmers and go to the local businesses and see if you can raise some money. Put the name on the table. Guy gives you $100 for a table and you put his name on it. But I don't see it's our place to be buying tables and that. One, we said you get one application. There's 3 of them here, right? It's not our place to be. We might as well just run the thing then, if that's the case.
Okay, I look to the treasurer, had her hand up.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor McClellan. So for clarification, they did submit one application. Since a portion of it was cash and a portion of it was in kind, I did split it out. And the third one that's on there, that wasn't part of their ask in their application, but much like the Pathstone one, it did come forward as a delegation to council. So I have included it there just so we could see the full picture of all of the asks before council.
Okay, thank you. So any other comments here where we want to go with this, or leave it status quo? And for this year, at status quo as in the $0 that we previously decided upon? Or is there a rethink on any of this? Councillor Gilmore?
Well, I mean, at the beginning, I added up $7,500 and throughout the whole evening, probably somewhere in the 6-figure number that has been levied over the last 3 years and not spent. So, not that we should revisit that, but it just demonstrates that there's some tidying up to do. Because I don't know where we stop and start. Like, who's going to get to pick what they want to pick off the list? Let's. In my opinion, we need to completely rework this and lots of other things and come back with a new plan going forward as far as grants.
For next year.
Yeah. And if there's something that's quite desperate, well, I came up with $7,500 at about 707. So, but I'm not suggesting that we reallocate that. We could, and that's, I have one vote. However, the whole thing needs to be revisited.
Okay, Councillor Van Vliet.
Now I'm on. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor Gilmore on this. I don't think we are the township's philanthropist. I can't even say the word. I'm too tired.
Philanthropist.
Thank you. I'm too tired to say it. As much as a lot of these places are near and dear to my heart as well, as an individual, I give to these, well, to one of them. So I think other people within the township probably contribute as well. So, I mean, we can't keep giving, like Councillor Gilmore said, we have to stay in our lane and stick to what's Wainfleet. And some of these are really not Wainfleet things. As much as I'd like to help everybody out, we just can't.
Okay, Councillor Cridlin, you're sitting there. Any comments?
Oh, thank you, through you, Mayor. I was the one offering the reset. So I'm basically listening. We've got, I know where I'm gonna land. So, that's it. I don't know if you're gonna call a question on this or however you want to proceed, but it's not really changed for me. It's not easy. All the comments are valid.
Okay, well, my sense is that we're going to leave it at $0. I think that there's basically consensus amongst us in that regard, so no further discussion required. I just wanted to bring that back because of the issues with COVID and the potential need for a few things. So, but we've had good discussion on it, and we've all landed on basically the same page. So, end of discussion. Which brings us to the end of our operational budget meeting this evening. Is there anything else from the CAO or the Treasurer or the CAO, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to ask the Treasurer just to do a quick overview of sort of the discussions that we had tonight. I think there was $7,500 identified as potential amendments to the budget. And if those amendments were made to the budget, what that impact would have versus the original number that was presented to you at 7 o'clock this evening.
So through the mayor to all of council, so with the reduction of the $7,500 worth of expenses, the municipal portion would be 5.48 for the increase for the operating, which would bring us to a blended rate of 3.11. Which that rate, just as a reminder, that's the rate that you're actually going to see your taxes go up by, which is the 3.11.
And what was it at 7 o'clock? 3.1.
3.16.
So 0.05, I think, is...
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in light of that, personally, I think there's other opportunities between now and Monday to lower that number more based on a lot of the other things. Whether you choose to or not is up to you, but like I just picked on ourselves, not anybody else. But as I go through it, there's other opportunities in there if we choose to exercise those.
So, Mr. CEO, I look to you for guidance on that. Do you want councillors to contact you in the next day or two with, oh, can we take this? But then we actually need all discussion amongst everybody. So it's challenging. It'll have to be at the next meeting. Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Maybe, now that we've got this new number, I mean, I know the number's material to understanding what's going to be happening, but I do kind of like numbers. So, I mean, if we're sitting at 3.1, we should be able to get, 2 point something, if that's kind of, the benefit to, communicating this to our residents. So, like Councillor Gilmore mentioned, for all of us just to take another quick look, and it didn't take him long to find just a little bit, and every little bit does help. So I'll certainly be doing that over the next couple days too. So thank you.
Okay, so I'd have to give guidance then that we come to the next meeting fully armed with where we want to discuss, losing some more dollars. I'll look to the Treasurer, Mallory.
Yeah, so through you to all of council. So yeah, I would request that council direct staff to come back with a specific number if they have just something for us to work with, because as mentioned, we have gone over the budgets. I understand that there's some discrepancy if you're looking line by line in terms of actuals to budgeting, and some of that is attributable to where things were posted versus where they were budgeted for. A lot of it will be corrected once we do our cleanup of our accounts. Just a couple of things to note. So with 4% of the 5.5 being contributing to capital, which is certainly where the bulk of the money should be spent, we are definitely trying to close the infrastructure gap. That leaves us less than an increase less than inflation. So years when the region has a low increase is the years where it's less impactful on the residents for us to kind of achieve some of these things where might have a greater impact. Because if the region has an impact next year, we're going to have to really strive to make sure we have a very low number. And with starting out with the principle that we want to contribute 4% to capital, that almost leaves no opportunity for any inflationary increases in operating. So in an effort to kind of save decimal places of a percentage point this year, we might actually be harming ourselves next year.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
just to build on that again, recall that the increase in the operating budget that was presented to you at 7 o'clock this morning, or this evening, was 1.6193%. So it's a very, very base budget already, well below inflation.
Just my comments on that. I wouldn't want to see any more shaved off, to be honest with you. Mallory's points are very, very important. The strategic direction of getting everything in shape as we move forward year by year, it can be hurt by, trying to shave a 0.001% off here and there. This is a good budget. 3.11 is very good. I mean, over what we've done the last 2 years. So this here, I don't think any residents are going to be, screaming at us too bad. The optics of trying to show the folks that we're trying to shave off a few more $1,000s here and there, if it hurts us in the end, is not worth it in my mind. We did shave off, and Councillor Gilmore is right, we shaved some off in our own area, but I have absolute, complete trust in our treasurer. She has the whole big picture and where we're going. When we've sat and had discussions about where we're going, not just this year, but how to position ourselves to be in good shape 5 years from now. And when she says there that this may be a disadvantage to try to shave off a little bit here or there for us as we move forward, I listen to that. I think that's important. And, we're going to be in really good shape in a few years, and I don't want to see us, doing little things and shaving here and there, which ends up hurting us in the end. So myself, I would encourage everybody to consider that 3.11 is an excellent budget, and to let it sit the way it is. Of course, you all are elected councillors and are, of course, able to do what you want in that respect, but that's my thoughts. So I'm happy with it the way it is. Thank you. So if there's nothing more, is there anything more? Okay. I guess I have a motion to, there's no close, there's no rise and report. I have a motion to close our meeting here. Motion by Councillor Van Vliet, seconded by Councillor McClellan. All in favor? And that is carried. And we have concluded our meeting and are adjourned. Thank you.